For a long time, I always thought engineering is something very straightforward to track. We have a lot of concept about how we organize our work. So it's like tickets on a Jira dashboard. It's like you got the tickets list, you got a project assigned to you. Now you break it them into tasks and pick them up during the release or the sprint planning. And then you implement them and you shape the features, you complete the task, and that's the work. That's pretty much what you call engineering work. It very straightforward, it's very visible, and you can easily explain to your managers or to your peers, to your team, what are you doing, what task are you on. Remember the dashboard every day when you look at it assigned to you, and then you start talking about what you're working on. In many ways, that's how our teams organize engineering work. We need planning. We need Jira ticket. We have to do pull request, and everything is measurable and tracked because you know how many pull requests you're doing, and then your manager also can see the contribution according to how many requests you close or you merge to the code base. But the more you work with real system, the more experience when you work as an engineer, as a senior engineer, the more you notice something's interesting, something different. Projects have a lot of aspect that can be make can affect its success or failure. And a lot of things, those kind of things are not always visible on the sprint dashboard. Or it doesn't show up on your planning. It doesn't show up on the ticket list. Some of them was pretty small, like questions that show up during a design review that can prevent a problem that you didn't see it during the planning. Some of them it's just like you building a pattern, you're noticing that there was a pattern that can benefit other teams when you're doing your implementation, and then the other team can actually reuse it and save their times to move forward with their projects. It not directly involved in your team, but it's directly impact other team. Or something that you saw that it can become a huge risk and turn into an incident once your product is shipped and released to the wild, and you notice it, you raise it, and you eliminate it before it's become a real problem. And most of the time, no one actually assign these kind of tests. You will never see a test like raise the questions during design review. You will never see a test that say find some risk before someone else. Before it's become a problem. You just start to noticing it, and then eventually you start handling this unspoken test. My name is Maya, and this is Be with Maya podcast. Today we're going to talk about the work that never appeared in a task list, but somehow it's become your responsibility and it's become part of your daily jobs that can impact much wider scope. But let's start with something simple. Why does this kind of work exist in the first place? You know what? Let's look at assigned work. Like look at the work that was visible on a task list. So those kind of works is pretty straightforward, pretty clear, right? Because someone else defined a task. Let's say your PM defined the epic, and then now you or your lead engineer will go into the epic. Will work together to define a list of tasks for you to pick up, or for you and your colleagues to pick up to start implement it. You will write code. Maybe you have to add unit test or functional test or end-to-end test to features that are a part of the features. Maybe you need to refactor the code base in order to make it more scalable. Those kind of things are easy to see when it's done because we have definition of done because it's listed at the task on the board. So we doesn't matter whether it's need to be QA, it need to pass on the LinkedIn, on the yeah, how to say prettier check. It still will be moving from in progress to done once it's satisfied on the definition of done. And it's very straightforward, very useful, the structure of how we measure this task, this work is very very straightforward for us. It helps us as a team functional. It helps us coordinate. It helps us to know who's on what is the progress of the projects. The project have about 20 open tasks, and we are closing 10 of them is going according to planning or according to the schedule. We can measure it great, and it helps us to plan our capacity, our how many headcount do we need for a project. There's nothing wrong with it. But the issue underneath it is that it creates a very narrow definition of work in the in the background, because now our works become whatever is lying there. You as engineer, you saw the epic, you saw the task list, and you say, okay, if at long as I finish all these bugs on these works assigned to me or the projects were listed in this epic, I finish with it, right? Whatever visible on the board is whatever is that you accomplish. But the thing is, these are just our definition of work. These are just definition of the task that will make the project moving. But it didn't reflect the whole scope of the project. And something very important get left out because to be honest, when you work with a real product, real features, it's not always according to a standard. It's not always organized like this. You have a list of 20 tasks to make it build brick by brick to make it into a shape of a features, but it still doesn't mean your feature is well organized. It can be very messy still because you you haven't identified everything yet. And implementation, if you look at the cycle of the software development, implementation is just one part of the whole cycle. The system, the projects, the features need more than just that. It needs awareness. It needs someone to actually notice when something is going off, when something is doesn't feel right, when something that we may have to take a step back and look in the broader scope. For example, in a code design review, recently we have a outage. Yeah, we have a bugs that we not an outage. We have a bugs that reported by a customer, and the bug is pretty simple. When they changed a field on one component, the other is had to reflect in another component of the workflow. It's reactivity. And we figure out that there's at the moment we don't have the system, the base system we're using for this reactivity doesn't support this kind of job. And so we decided that we want to do some kind of workaround that only applies to us. And we saw the specific problem of reactivity, like when user change one thing and it reflects to another field with the actual data from the database. The implementation was fine. The workaround looked great. But then one of the staff engineer actually noticed something and raised the questions. What happened if the user, um, if later on we remove this workaround for the complete solution? That will break the current user workflow because it doesn't have the new changes from the new solution. Or you go do a code review, and then you saw the code is fine, but you notice that this code have a generic pattern that maybe on teams that working on something similar can be benefited from. When that's not a bug. These are not a bug. These are just observation that you saw that can be a problem later on, but at the moment there's no ticket about it. There's no one decide whether this worth addressing, whether we should make it in generic layer, whether we should think about how we're going to remove the workaround and not making the customer facing the potential regression and so on. Or maybe you just noted that you and your friends team are working on something that very similar and can collaborate. Again, these are not a bug, right? It's also not a test because no one write a test about, oh, notice the other team is working on something similar to you. It's just an observation. It's just something that you noticed and then you raised it because if you don't say anything, we will end up with duplication. We will end up with potential regression later on. And the more quiet you keep, the duplication, the potential risk will grow. And that's what the kind of jobs that we are talking about today. The work that exists, but it just doesn't reflect on the board. And interestingly, this kind of work tend to appear more often as you go as an experienced engineer. As the more experience you gain, the more you will start noticing this stuff earlier. So so what changed? What make the shift for your experience? What make you notice it more often? Well, early in the career, like when I start my engineering career, all I care is execution. Like, and all I care is just how I implement my task, how I learn about the system fast enough in order for me to go in and start working my way around it. And I learn in all different framework, different libraries, different things that help to shape the code base. And then I start to learn how to implement features, and or maybe I'll just learn it by fixing small bug at unit tests here and there and so on. And that exactly at the junior you should focus on. It it's not a problem. You should focus on this because it gives you the solid base of understanding how the system work and how you move around the framework, and it gives you some solid technical skill to move up, and those skills really matter regardless. Nowadays that AI can help you with almost most of that, like learning the framework for you, give it the code already work that you can shorten your implementation time and move faster. You still need to learn how the system work in order to make sure that AI doesn't give you something that hurt the system later on. But anyway, over time, these kind of things shift. It's not like you still work in implement features, but at some point you become more familiar with the system, you become more familiar with the code base, then you start developing a higher level of observation of the system, and you start seeing things differently, seeing things earlier. Like you start seeing all these patterns on the risk, on the dependency between different code base, different system. much earlier that you can raise it. For example, we all know how to implement a component, like for UI component, take just for the sake of it, and we know how to implement a list of like a list of image, a gallery. But then, if you are a junior, you will implement a list of gallery, and that's it. You're done with it. But you are a senior, you will start to think about the pattern, whether we want to make the list of items become more generic, so we can use not just for images, we can reuse it for list of file, list of tests, so on and so forth. This is the pattern in general. And or you can identify that something looks okay today, sorry, look like a small risk today may become a bigger problems tomorrow. Some unhandled error on the API design that look like it should be fine, but if you don't ask the questions, or if you don't check a bit more into it, tomorrow become an outage and we can face the risk of data loss or cyber attack later on. And that's when you start to understand that the more valuable things is not about writing code, but not about how many PR you start opening, how many bug that you fix in one sprint is not the most valuable thing you can contribute to the team. It's about asking a simple questions, such as, "Are we sure that this system will can handle like a scalable enough? Are we sure that we want to own this responsibility? Do we know if the other teams is planning to do it or developing the same thing with us, so we can collaborate and make sure that we don't duplicate the task, and maybe we can share some findings, some lesson learned along the way, and make the things move faster." Those questions never appear in tickets. They also never appear in a design document. It's never appear on the project description, but it can save a lot of time for the work, weeks, months for moving your project faster. And to be honest, AI won't be able to do it for you. AI is like you have to give some things to AI to answer. But at you, an engineer, you have to be proactive and raise the question before someone else asks about it. Or before someone else come and say, "Hey, wait a moment, we forgot about this," and now it's become a huge problem. That is when your engineering work is not about just about task. It's about more about awareness, about responsibility, about ownership, and so on. This type of works is very hard to measure, and usually we tend to call it the invisible work. So, the one of the tricky things about this type of work is, let us say, raising awareness that when it's done well, nothing dramatic happens. People most of the time will not remember to credit you for that. It just that it just helped to make your product become more stable, release successfully, and you will reduce the risk of being on call at 2 a.m. in the morning fixing what should have been prevented. On the risk will identify early, and then there's no duplication because now we have a shared ownership with other team and everyone is happy. And the direction of the product is go according to what the customer expected and not just what we assume. Basically, because we identify most of the problem that can go wrong, that can affect the success of a feature, the work, these work become invisible. No one probably will remember that you raised that questions and we fix it because we don't see the customer complaining about it. Well, you don't close any ticket. There's no visible, real, clear, visible output here because when you build pattern to share between the two team enjoying it, it doesn't mean that that it will be reflect on the board, right? And yeah, it's not an immediate satisfaction feeling that you have when you create a PR and it get merged. It's not a satisfaction, immediate satisfaction when you have when you ship a critical bug fix to customer and it solve your customer problem and the customer finally happy. It can feel frustrating sometimes. I know that. Because most of the time you will have to note down what you write and the system usually tracks the contribution according to visible output and like how many PR you close, how many bugs you close, how is the velocity in a sprint for your task assigned to you, code written, how many features you deliver in one on one release and so on and so forth. And then if you manage to do one features but you hope other teams scale, you need to remember to mention it in your performance review because your manager may or may not aware of all this work. But yeah, that can be frustrated. But in fact, if you look around you and you can see that more and more experienced engineers spending more time not on the specific task or not on the small scale task. They more they actually um, spend more times on things like trying to align between the teams. And I also find myself most of the time we're just trying to connect between this team and that team to see that we are doing something that can benefit both of us or clarifying the decisions from the products to end to make sure that everything is clear and we can moving on with our planning and executions without a blocker in the middle that we have to backtrack. And of course, most one important part is to ask question, notice the problem and ask the question earlier to prevent any problem can raise in the future. And those kind of stuff is rarely shown. I mean, it's not rarely. It's like almost 100% of the time doesn't show on the dashboard. But it does. It does contribute and does make an impact. And many in many way, it's actually contribute to the success of the project. But it would not guarantee the project will success even more because the project or the features delivery is measurement, a KPI is very specific that you ship this feature to customer, the customer user is happy. But if you do the pattern or the hard work, the groundwork for that behind the scene, no one really care. I mean, the user will not even know that you're doing that. So the success is still there, but it's not making it like triple the success. It's just making sure that your project will be delivered successfully and not failing loudly. Now, unfortunately, having an outage in productions after you release a features caught more attention than delivering a project that is successful and everyone using and not making any complaint. We used to have a funny joke about how we can get a promotion that you make a box, you implant a box into your feature or someone a feature in the code base, ship your product with it, and then wait until it's become an incident, and then you jump in and build solutions to fix it and ship it to customer, and now you can proudly say making a huge impact to resolve the customer outage, and that can consider a good candidate for promotion. Of course, don't do that because it's just a joke, but it makes sense in a way. So now here comes the question. So if the work isn't assigned to you, isn't measurable that easily, how will you ever realize that? How will you ever recognize it or approach it in order to raise it, right? To own it. Well, the more things that you focus on, it will just make you have less time to actually make a step back and look at things in the bigger scope. So that's one of the things I start to notice where over time. So I used to try to do a lot of things at one time, and then it's just not good because I don't have times to take a step back and take a look at other things in bigger scope. So in the end, I have to choose a fewer things to focus for myself, like one or two things, and then I can have time to look at other things, like look at the design review of other people, or like look at the code base and the wider scope, and have more time to discuss with my colleague and see where will be the potential area that to be improved. So, and one of the things that we change is that instead of just asking what needs to be implemented in these features during planning or during the design aspect, I start to ask myself, what could go wrong from here? What are we missing? What assumptions are we making? Sometimes it leads to more code writing. Let's say if we figure out that there's some security issue, we may need to raise it. We may need to write the code to handle it. Sometimes it just lead to more conversation, more meetings, because now that I know that we need additional team to be involved, we need to make sure that it's respond according to what we want to push to it. Then yeah, we need to have a conversation with a different team, right, and to understand what their constraints and whether they can help us to develop it. Or sometimes it's just raising a small concern early, like we in my work we used to have we have one of the features that is about synchronization. A customer requests it to be able to sync between different device, the work that can be performed by two or three different people. Yeah, probably pull in the latest data, and and whoever pulled first will get on the newest data, and then working on it, and then we do the push back to the system, and the other side will have to pull. But the concern here is that how often do we want to pull the new data? What happens if we have conflict between the data that this end user is modifying with the other end user is modifying? All of these small details can affect the success of the project. And not only that, how the user expects to be synchronized. They expect to pull the list to get the newest data, or they expect to get a push notification, or they expect to have it quietly update without them doing any extra action. That can change the directions of a project. And to be honest, these are not raised to be so immediately. You will rarely see a case where you go into a design review and someone raised the questions and people will say, oh yeah, I have a solution for that. Most of the time, it's just that the team will respond by saying, yeah, we haven't looked into it yet. We have to get back to you on that. We have to figure out. The goal is not about showing that you have a solution for every single problem. The goal is not to solve it you immediately on the spot. The goal is just to make sure that the problem is erased and visible for everyone to notice. Maybe the project is not feasible enough. Maybe we need to smaller the scope. We need to have a different direction for it, right? And this is like one of the very important shift as you go along your career. You don't just sit in there implement it according to the definition or the description that you will receive. You actually aware of more about ownership. You're aware of responsibility. You start seeing things in the wider scope before it becomes something that can affect your products, your team at the whole. And that's important. And that's uh, can give you a perfect place for making a wider impact. And that brings us to a small reflection before we finish, and I want to leave you with some of the most valuable work that us at engineering do. It never appears in a task. It's never really measurable in a way. You can say you are 100 time like 10x engineer, that you can push 100 different PRs. Well, face it, AI can do it better than you, and you can just review it, help you to do it faster. But again, it's not the whole thing. Sometimes it's just about questions, small questions that you raised during a conversation with your teammates that help them moving along with the project. Can really make a huge impact on other people's works. And often, no one assigns this responsibility. It just gradually become part of your work as you grow to be more senior. And that is the questions to think about. What is the regular piece of work you are doing right now that it didn't appear in a ticket? You don't have to answer it right now. Just think about it and look around you. Maybe just pay a bit more attention to what you're doing daily, and then you'll be surprised that you may already actually doing that. And if this episode resonate with you, follow me at Be With Maya on Spotify or Apple Podcast or on YouTube. And if someone in your team that you noticed that they've been doing this kind of invisible work, you may want to share this episode with them.